One of the big steps to mastering a lift is to incorporate other movements that have strong carryover to that main movement and become brutally strong in those. Let's get into some assistance work that can skyrocket your deadlift strength. The first category of assistance movements I want to focus on is rowing variations. Now, I really want to focus in on the barbell row from the floor, but really you can do any rowing variation. Now, there's going to be two parts to this. The first is going to be really looking at more of a finesse type of movement and focusing on that mind-muscle connection, getting a good contraction in the lat. And the second one is going to look at more power. So getting a lot of weight on the bar, using a little bit of body English, getting that weight moving off the floor into a row motion. I think these both have a place in training the upper back and pushing your deadlift limits, but I think you also need to make sure that you're incorporating both at a good balance in your training program. So the second category is going to be hinge style movements. I'm partial to RDL type of movements or a snatch grip deadlift, stuff where I still have the bar in my hands, but it's a little bit lower stress than you're going to get with a max effort deadlift. I do like good mornings, and I'll use banded good mornings in my giant sets. And then I've been incorporating more 45-degree back raise variations in lately. And I've been doing those with a barbell and a snatch grip to really elongate the range of motion. But whatever you choose and whatever you think works for you, you just want to really practice this movement pattern a lot. Make sure you're efficient with getting your hips back and bringing them into full extension, incorporating the glutes as your primary extensor muscle, but then also hitting the hamstrings and the lower back, and really focusing on that rigid core and posture and keeping your lower back fixed as you do these. So the next category I want to talk about is squatting movements. Now we're going to talk about two different ones, but the first one is going to be a front squat. Now, I try to focus on the upper back tightness with this, but also the leg drive. So you really want to make sure you're establishing that tight upper back like you want on a deadlift, but then also being able to push off the floor. And I'll try to line this up as specifically as I can with my competition stance for deadlift. So the next squatting movement that I want to focus in on is the box squat, and particularly the wide stance box squat, because it emphasizes the glutes so much, but also the adductors. So as you sit down on a box, like, you really need support from the adductors to maintain that wide stance and support that weight. With the wide stance, you're really incorporating the glutes as well. Now, this gets into like some stuff I've talked about too, like that Louis Simmons really study was like the resting component overcome by dynamics. So you are in a resting component, you aren't tightened up when you pull a deadlift off the floor. So that's why I like this aspect. And then you have to get the glutes actually obviously have to be strong as well as the hamstrings, but then you need the co-contraction from the adductors and the hip flexors to pull yourself off the box and stand up. Now, you're probably saying, hey, you just covered a squat variation where you said focus in on specificity with stance. Now you're saying do a wide stance squat. I'm not a sumo puller. Well, that's true, but I feel like this variation is so powerful to support those hips, get the adductors going, get the glutes going, that when you bring your stance in, your hips are so strong and you're so stable. Like, you ever pulled an adductor or medial hamstring deadlifting? No, well, it sucks. And I would really like to prevent that in the future for myself and for others. And I think this is a big component. Now, somebody had asked me once, is the lat training or the glute training more valuable to building your deadlift? And I said, like, right away, lat training. But I spent so much time coming up in powerlifting, training sumo deadlift, and then eventually incorporating this and training the wide stance box squat as well. I feel like I never had to worry about the glute activity as much. So I think this is a big aspect, and I think it's something you definitely want to give a try and then see how your deadlift responds. The next category is going to be single leg movements, and I really want to focus on the split squat. So notice how I'm not saying necessarily Bulgarian split squat. I actually just like a normal split squat, both legs on the floor. Now, I like to get that forward lean and get the glute activity more so than the quad. That's something I've heard John Meadows talk about, as well as Cal Dietz. Why I love this so much is because it's so versatile. So if you want to get more quad activity, if you feel like you need to work on your quads a little bit more, get that leg drive off the floor, get more of an upright stance, get more forward knee translation, and focus more on your quads. And you can also do this on a plate if a slant board is too advanced for you. So front foot elevated split squat, going to be more quad. I might do this with like an elevated leg, like more of a Bulgarian split squat to get that forward lean. We also, I've shown in my training vlog, the front foot floating heel split squat. And you're just doing this on the both feet on the floor, but that front heel is floating, it's elevated, and you're really trying to maintain that foot strength, pushing the big toe into the ground, forward lean, so you're getting a lot of glute activity. And I feel like this has really pushed my strength of my deadlift because you're making sure those legs are balanced out, that you don't have an asymmetry in one leg being stronger than the other or a hip shift. This really cleans a lot of that up. So I would urge you, even if it's a simpler variation, such as a single leg press, a single leg like supported squat, like with the TRX or gymnastic rings, but something to really like focus on single leg strength as part of your assistance program, I think would be really beneficial. So the last category is going to be core work. Now, I absolutely think that this has to be involved in your program, and I think it needs to be evolved in different forms. So static or isometric work like abdominal bridges, side bridges. You can combine the isometric work with concentric work in another area. So I really like the side bridge leg raise or hip abduction exercise. I used to always like do giant sets with the deadlift and then hanging leg raises. And then as you get good at these, you can raise, pause, and then just work on that slow eccentric. So that's getting an eccentric component. Now people are gonna be like, oh, well, that doesn't just train the core, that trains the hip flexors. Train your freaking hip flexors. They are so important. I just explained with the box squat that there's a co-contraction component. Some people are going to have tight hip flexors and have an anterior pelvic tilt, and then you can work on stretching that, do some RPR in your psoas, get a pso right, but you need to have strong hips to continue to make progress and lift big weights. So let's focus on all the hip muscles and not just the glutes. Train your core, train your hip flexors. Ooh, bonus tip. Didn't see that one coming, did ya? So if you've been stuck on a plateau for a while, you just can't get your deadlift moving, you're kind of like, I don't even feel comfortable with my conventional deadlift, do a very aggressive deficit deadlift. Now, some people will be like, oh yeah, I do deficit deadlifts for my stiff legs. No, do a normal deadlift. Make sure you're keeping your back safe. Get down and get a good posture set. Don't get yourself injured doing this, but, set up the way you're supposed to set up, normal deadlift, but get that extra leg drive and extra range of motion. And it's the same thing we've been talking about with some of these other exercise variations. Get that extra range of motion in. It can really be beneficial. Getting a little more time under tension, getting extra mechanical stress. And that might be something that just helps you to break through that plateau and get things moving again. You may have already been doing these. Another thing you might be able to incorporate that can just help you crush through that plateau and keep your deadlift moving is accommodating resistance. So mainly I'm thinking bands, getting that tension build up as you continue through the movement and getting more resistance at the top. I see a ton of people that struggle with their lockouts, and bands is something that really got me to where I could, like, the speed that I had off the floor to my knees, continue with that speed above my knees into lockout. I do like chains as well. They can be a little bit more difficult to set up on a deadlift, but that's something that you could try also. Those are just two things, like, not involved in the 5 tips I presented before, not always going to be like a staple in the training program, but something I really feel like you could just use to just break through that plateau where you just can't get the deadlift moving again. And it's something that I've gone through a ton, and those like drastic changes, just being really aggressive, and it's painful, it sucks, but in the end it'll benefit you more than you thought was possible. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you guys that have watched both parts of this deadlift series. If you haven't watched part 1, go back and watch part 1. There's a lot of good information in that one as well. Obviously, big deadlifter. I'm really passionate about the lift. It's probably become my favorite lift. So I will definitely be doing some more content about that. If you have any questions or you just want to say, hey, I subscribed, or let me know how this video series has helped you, leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Hold strong.